Welcome to Environmental Fridays. It is Personal, Season 2. You can learn more about our topics and speakers by joining our Environmental Fridays Facebook group. This series is brought to you by Best Early, the Benton Spirit Community Newspaper, Andrews University Community Engagement Council, GC Scored, Every Piece Matters. Introducing your host, Dr. Desmond Hartwell Murray, and this week's co-host, Princella Tobias. This week on Environmental Fridays, we'll be hearing from Professor Laurel Berman, DePaul University student Samara Metley, DePaul University student Noel Horace III.
Okay, so we want to welcome everyone again to Environmental Fridays. It is personal. This is episode 7. And this is again another exciting episode, partly because of my friend, Laurel Berman. She is something else. You will see. So this is season 2 of Environmental Fridays. And I have a co-host, maybe? I prepared these slides before she decided whether she was going to be co-host or not. Princess?
I'm honored.
Okay. I had faith that this would work out. So she'll be our co-host. She would mostly assist in the Q&A section today. But a co-host, Princella Tobias, what can I say about her also? She is one of my best friends. And in terms of some of the things that she's doing, she is the founding publisher of the Benton Spirit Community Newspaper, which just celebrated its 20th anniversary last week. Was it last week? She is also the founding CEO of Benton Harbor Team Solutions, which is trying to address not just the water issue in Benton Harbor, but all relevant issues that come out of it as well. She is very active in the community. It's sort of like her ministry, and she has a very great heart. And so you'll hear from her as well. And it's an honor to have her alongside to co-host our friend, our mutual friend, and her students. So before you hear from them, I usually go over why we started Environmental Fridays. It was started to basically contextualize chemistry and make it real for my grade 10 chemistry class. Over the years, that's something I've been trying to do and came up with Environmental Fridays. And in fact, Dr. Berman was one of my first guest speakers back then. But over time, I think you guys would agree that many of the younger generation actually are more conscious and aware of the environment. But this series hopefully will give them some information and inspiration to continue on being aware and conscious and active, proactive about the environment. We also, of course, have the general public, anyone interested, and everyone should be because it is personal. I usually say too that life without the environment is basically non-existent. There's a intimate dependence and interrelationship between the two. Energy and matter is exchange that is essential for life, and that sort of fundamental scientific reasoning should allow us to be humble to the environment and be stewards of our environment. These are some of the topics we have discussed and will continue to discuss. And I have to interject here because we are all aware of what's happening in Ukraine. And based on the presentation topic today about brownfields, I think it's war not only leads to human loss, but also to the degradation and destruction of the environment, probably also a cause of brownfields. So the topic is timely in that sense. So we hope that persons listening to this, being part of it, it will create awareness and enlightenment and also spur on people, encourage others to be proactive about the environment because it is personal. So our speakers today, I'll be doing the introduction of them. First, Professor Laurel Berman. I don't know if she expected me to call her professor, but she should, because she teaches at 3 universities, at University of Illinois in Chicago. She teaches at DePaul University, and right here is a colleague at Andrews University. She holds a PhD and MS degree in environmental and occupational health sciences. And she is the director for the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registries National Land Use Health Program. It is a mouthful, Laurel.
It's one of our shorter names.
It is a mouthful. So she is going to be one of our presenters today. Then you will also be hearing from her students. Horace Nowell III, who is an MPH candidate at DePaul University in Chicago, and Samara Mentley, also a PhD, MPH candidate at DePaul in Chicago. Samara is also currently an ATSDR intern through DePaul and working with air quality awareness and health messaging. Both of them will give us a little bit more meat to who they are and what they're about and what they do when they present. So at this time, I will stop sharing and turn over to that team of presenters.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Murray. I do teach as an outside activity at Andrews. I taught 2 classes yesterday in the undergraduate public health program. And so does my colleague, Dr. Matria Caudil. And we've been gifted with Masters of Public Health interns from DePaul. My alma mater is University of Illinois at Chicago, right in the west side of Chicago, the near west side. And I started teaching there a number of years ago, but I also started teaching at DePaul. And I love teaching, but it's really kind of grown because my full-time position is with the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. And there are 2 people in my group. We've had some part-time folks. Some people have retired. And so our interns really do quite a bit of work with us. And hopefully we're preparing them for future employment. Many have been hired. My DePaul intern in environmental science was just hired by one of our partners. And I'll give a little background before I go into the talk. Our agency, because we are small, relies on a vast network of stakeholders. One of the stakeholders, I'm shocked, Vanessa Frazier, is probably muted. She's at the bottom of my screen. I'm not sure where she is in others, but longtime community partner of ATSDR. So we have a program where we have people from all backgrounds in community revitalization. They could be filmmakers, activists, community champions, environmental regulators, university partners, and we all come together and give free technical assistance to communities. It's our way of giving back. It's also a way to expand our reach. And so Andrews University is in a community partnership with ATSDR. Howardville, Missouri. For lack of a better term, Vanessa is the first lady of Howardville. Truly, she's the mayor's partner, and also is really needs to be giving one of these talks. The history of the Missouri boot heel is alone is just amazing. So a little bit about our community partnerships. I'll go ahead and pull up my slides. I have to put my blue glasses on for Desmond because he likes them.
That's right.
Desmond, you too can have these Joanne fabrics. So I'm going to talk about brownfields and what these are. And this is in presenter view. Maybe I need to change the view for everyone.
Okay.
Okay, just to make it a little larger. So this gorgeous building, to me, is a beautiful, beautiful building in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. What's behind the building is nearby, after those trees, is Lake Superior. So this building is on a very shallow depth to groundwater. And maybe you can see here, there's some old drums, probably from auto oil. There's maybe an animal broke in here. I was certainly looking in the window here. The age of the building could have lead-based paint, could have some asbestos in the roofing material. And this is what we call a brownfield. And a brownfield is an underused, abandoned, or incompatibly located site that could be contaminated. So it could actually be an active site, like having an auto parts and service station business on a riverfront walkway, which is actually one community that we work with. I walked around back of this building and saw sort of a rigged up mechanism with the drum on it. Looked inside, the floor is littered with waste oil. So this was servicing engines on a very shallow depth to groundwater of pristine Lake Superior. And these sites are everywhere. They're all over the country. They're all over the world. Brownfields is a term coined by the US Environmental Protection Agency, and it's become a global term for these sort of blighted and abandoned sites that could be underutilized. So my agency creates a safety net to try to prevent people from accessing these sites and to get them remediated and reused if possible. Some of them are perfectly fine buildings with infrastructure. They have wiring, they have plumbing, they're hooked to the water system and can be reused. There is a lot of brownfields redevelopment that has happened in Benton Harbor, where Princella has her Benton Spirit newspaper. And in Berrien County overall, Berrien County is the county in which Andrews University sits. Andrews is in Berrien Springs. In Berrien County, it's very hard to get a brownfields grant, and they have not been successful at getting a grant since 2014. So there are sites like this, and there are larger sites that could be reused that are draining the city's economy because they're not contributing to the tax base. And who has to pay if the city becomes the property of, if a property becomes the property of a city or county, you have to pay taxes on it. So brownfields, these potentially contaminated commercial, industrial, sometimes residential, vacant and underused properties are estimated to be about 500,000. And I challenge that number in my own personal opinion, because we have 10 million vacant properties in this country. And that was a number from 10 years, 11 years ago. Vacant properties are continuing to rise. Some of them could have lead-based paint, could have been used for hobbies or commercial purposes that contaminate them with harmful chemicals. So these properties have real or perceived contamination. Most of them do have some level of contamination. I think EPA estimated about 30% may not be contaminated, but that is also just an estimate. And typically brownfields are targets of redevelopment for economic purposes. And when you think about economic development, sometimes you can get a warehouse that has 2 or 3 shifts, maybe storage facility. I don't know what that's doing for the public's health. Are you providing jobs? Maybe 6, and have a huge facility. But what if that had been redeveloped into a community center and a wellness center or a satellite clinic that could be of benefit to the community? And this is where public health comes into the picture. Sometimes we're the developer's nightmare because we're the people that say, wait a minute, how are you integrating health in this redevelopment? We call this health fields, brownfields to health fields. And when we promote health fields, we're promoting economic development through community revitalization to specifically address injustice, reduce health disparities and inequities in these communities that are burdened with these sites. Our program, we just go by our acronym ATSDR, the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. That's a mouthful. We abbreviate our name to Health Land Reuse Program, which makes our director, Dr. Patrick Pricey, very happy that we have a short name. And we always tell communities when they say, that's the ASTDR. And I said, no, we're not the STD program, but we do have a program at CDC for STDs. So we have a very long name that would take an act of Congress to change, but we really champion our communities. Those are our experts. They teach us more than we can teach them about community resilience and redevelopment that benefits the community. So we create a lot of community tools and resources to help people learn about health-focused land reuse and health fields redevelopment. And we do a lot of training, and we're getting much bigger with our training, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. We train environmental health professionals, planners, city administrators about public health benefits of a health fields approach, but we also train the communities that these folks serve. Brownfields are not benign. They can hurt our environment. This is a sappy paper mill in Muskegon, not too far from Berrien County, Muskegon, Michigan. Muskegon Lake is on Lake Michigan. This has sat fenced for years. And if you're familiar with pulp and paper mills, the word that should come to mind immediately is dioxin. This years ago, probably around 1990, we discovered that bleaching of paper to make it bright white, you might argue why we needed that white, and then there's other alternatives, can create a lot of chlorinated compounds. Pulp and paper mills also damage rivers and streams. They tend to be on water. They need a lot of water for production. And we can end up with something that looks like this on a Great Lake. This is being cleaned up. We can remove contaminants. But what we see from brownfields in general, that it leads to disinvestment in a community. Housing quality can go down. You start having vacancy and blight. You don't get those amenities of walking trails, recreational areas. Kids are sometimes afraid to go play in the local park. It could be dangerous. Air quality can be reduced. We see higher risk of disease like cancer and lung disease, and other health disparities start to emerge. Less years of life, lowered life expectancy. Then we start getting limited access to healthy foods. Hard to get a fancy high-end organic grocery store in an area that doesn't look like it can financially or economically support it. And then we begin to see the community go into this vortex or cycle of disinvestment. So with 500,000 of these sites as an estimate, they can range in size from 1 acre, less than 1 acre, to thousands of acres. And almost every community has them. Could be a vacant lot, could be a burned building. This again is Sappy. This is a site in Chicago. This is a site in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. When we look at the types of hazardous waste sites there are in the US, NPL, we always hear, oh, Superfund, that's the worst. But some sites like this could be at that level. These Superfund sites, however, tend to have a more complex contamination profile. Multiple media impacted: the groundwater, the air, the land. At any given time, there's about 1,400 sites on the national priorities list. They get put on this list, and then ATSDR has a mandate to do a health consultation or assessment on those sites. And at any given time, there's 3,000 to 6,000 Resource Conservation and Recovery Act violators Maybe they're not handling their waste within their 90-day permit. Maybe they've had a little oopsie on site. Maybe they're improperly storing drums. So you look at this is about, 8,000 sites here. Compare that to 500,000, which is an estimate. So just going on that estimate, brownfields are 60 times more prevalent than other types of sites. They are the greatest number of potentially contaminated sites in the US, and in some cases globally, that can pose threats to community health. So this is why we do something about this. We're a tiny little agency. All these gray dots, this map has been updated since we continually update this, but right now, maybe as of 2020, there were 33,000 sites that had obtained funding from the US Environmental Protection Agency or the state, which the EPA funds, to assess and or clean up brownfields. They're everywhere. They're in all the states, territories, tribal areas. And these little colored shapes are where our little agency is running around with a big stick and trying to do something. Here's Michigan. You can practically not see it because of the large number of brownfields in Michigan. Andrews is down here somewhere. This is where I am. This is where our team is, Laurel, Samara, and Horace. Out here, Navajo Nation, we have a project here. Our projects are either free technical assistance, funding community health projects, or if we don't have funding, we fund by other means. Vanessa and I had a grant from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Vanessa and the Missouri Boot Hill. So we were able to impact 4 areas, one in the Upper Peninsula, a double project here in Navajo Nation, and one in Missouri Boot Hill, with a small amount of funding, which ended up leveraging, in this case, in Navajo Nation, over $1 million in other funding. So that big stick we carry as a small agency, we carry a big partnership with us of stakeholders who care so much about brownfields that they want to help clean them up everywhere. And we have a new partnership in Romania, in which we also have Ukrainian partners, really emphasizing the need for community engagement in these former Soviet bloc countries. It's catching on that people can drive redevelopment, and we're even working in Eastern European countries. So how do we learn about this contamination? This hat is now banned from my wardrobe forever, permanently. And my husband donates his photographs. So the really beautiful photos are from Lloyd DeGrain, who teaches photo voice to a lot of our communities and students. This is our colleague, Dave Laney, our Romanian scholar, came on a Fulbright. Randall Bernthal, who was a former Masters of Public Health student from UIC, who's now been hired by a local company that's in our Stakeholder Network, and 2 of our student interns from Diné College. We're in Holbrook here, which is just outside of Navajo Nation. The former Route 66 is just littered with places like this. When the Highway 40 came through, all of a sudden, all these gas stations and this nostalgic drive you can take from Illinois all the way through the country became less used. So first, to learn about these sites, we have to learn what we know. We might see these sites, so we know there's a problem. Then we have to learn what we don't know. The community tells us what we don't know, loud and clear. What we didn't know about Holbrook until Dave Laney, who's an expert in site assessment and in our Stakeholder Network, told us, was that this half of Holbrook, this lower in elevation half, has so much petroleum contamination that people can't live here anymore because it comes up through cracks in the foundation. It's a vapor intrusion problem. And so how do we create a solution? It's going to take a lot of money to pump out that vapor, pump out that gasoline. The groundwater in Holbrook, despite being the dry area, is 6 feet below the surface with a layer of petroleum contamination on top of it that can be inhaled by residents and business owners. So what I usually ask students is, what's contaminated media? I don't know if any of you are willing to go on unmute or to go into the chat. What is contaminated media? Can anyone tell me?
Contaminated media.
Dr. Murray
Are
should
you
know the answer.
talking, yeah, well, are you talking about the pollution itself or where it exists? Because I would say the media would be the land, water, and air, and they're contaminated by different things. I don't know.
That is correct. I need to reshare. I'm so sorry. I just had a message come in from work that disrupted my slides. Okay. When I ask students in a public health class, what is contaminated media? They usually tell me it's such and such news, a news outlet. And I said, well, not in this class. It's not the Benton spirit. But that's usually what they think, is that it's poor messages from the media, but it's our air, land and soil, and the food we eat. And then I ask them, what's an exposure route? And exposure leads to all kinds of questions. So this is a good place to start. What media is impacted? Is it the ground? Is it the water? Is it the air? Is it all of them? Is it the food? And are we exposed? So this is our contaminated media. Our soil, land, air are definitely water, sediments. I always say, what goes up must come down, and it usually lands in and ends up in the sediments, the ultimate repository. We have a toxic legacy, historical layering of contamination in our sediments for chemicals that are loving of sediment. Some are not. And so this can be from past uses like open dumping, burying waste. Oh my goodness, burying waste, especially in rural communities that have to pay for garbage service or drive a far distance, burning and burying waste, leaking petroleum or chemical tanks, and emissions that enter the air and fall out on the soil, run off into the waterways. And then of course, runoff. So people that change their oil and pour it down the storm drain, that's going directly here. It's a direct path. We talk about a direct path to God. That's a direct path into our water and sediments. Mm-hmm. Don't pour your oil into the storm drain. And a lot of things run off our cars into our storm drains. Exposure routes. We can touch a substance. We can eat it. We can breathe it in. Touching, breathing, eating. But we have to have a completed exposure route. And what does this mean? So a completed exposure route means it's in our bodies. It's had a way to get in our bodies. So I always give this example. So I'm in a building that was built in the 60s. Let's say there's peeling paint all up on my windowsills, and my window is closed. There's not really a lot of air moving in here, but there is lead-based paint there. And I'm 6 feet away from that window. You can see the light. Am I exposed to lead? Do I have a completed exposure pathway? Mm-hmm. Now, okay, and now it's warm in here, so I'm going to go open the window, and I do get some dust on my hands because I work a lot and don't clean often. And now I'm going to sit down, and I just love drinking this tea, and I'm touching the top of my cup. I do that a lot, and I'm taking a sip. Absolutely delicious. Am I exposed to lead now?
Yep. You sure?
And my eye's itchy, so I'm going to rub my eye. Dermal pathway, maybe rub my nose. So if contamination is there and we walk by it and there's no wind, we don't walk with our shoes through it, it's just there. My window's closed. There's no air movement. I don't have a fan on the window. I likely don't have a completed exposure pathway. But if I touch it, I open that window, I may get some dust on my hands, or I work in a facility where we're recycling metal and I wear my clothes home and I don't take my shoes off at the door and my kids crawl all over me, I could be exposing them to lead and they could have a completed exposure pathway. So that completed exposure route is one of the most important things that we teach when it comes to environmental health. And then we need to talk about what are chemicals of concern at brownfields and land reuse sites. And Horace is going to talk to you about this in his presentation. I'm keeping track of time, okay, 9 o'clock, my time. So, and I should tell you, there's a trigger warning on this slide because of there's 3 numbers here, but this is in Niles, Michigan. When we talk about contaminants at brownfield sites, they're the same contaminants that we have at Superfund sites. They're the same contaminants we can find throughout the world. Now, I live in the Midwest, Michigan, showed you the map. Those are the sites. I'm gonna go back to this map really quickly, because I want to point something out about this map. These are sites that received funding to assess them. 33,000 out of 500,000. So that means a whole lot of sites, over 450,000, have not been assessed. You got to get a grant. They're very hard to get. Assessment can take years, 3 years usually. Then you got to get cleanup funding. How are you going to clean it up? You know what's there now, at least you know what's there. How are you going to clean it up? That's another grant if you can get it. Maybe you can lure a developer who loves to clean up brownfields because they get all kinds of tax incentives. Then you got to do the redevelopment. So we're talking years in some cases. I work with some communities that have had brownfields standing there for decades. And as these sites erode, what do you think happens? This site is 4 city blocks square. It's enormous. And it is near a high school. And right outside of it is a playground, a little public playground. Clearly, people can get in. This is insulation. We don't know what's in there. Is it fiberglass? Could it have asbestos? Is there lead-based paint? We do know this site's contaminated with polychlorinated biphenyls. That's on the books. So does that mean people can be exposed to PCBs there and other chemicals? At a minimum, there's all kinds of debris, slips, trips, falls, other hazards, and looks like a great place to skateboard because it's a huge space. And as you walk home from school, you walk past this site. The site is reported to be fenced. I always say, go out back. And out back, look, residential neighborhood, this is the site. And at waist height, there's no glass in the windows. It's pretty easy to hop on in there. And people clearly do from the graffiti. So Michigan is what I call one of our top 10 states. It's one of our Midwestern states. The 6 Midwestern states, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, Minnesota, Michigan, I'm leaving one out, Wisconsin. We have 35% of the hazardous waste sites in the country. That's where I live. That's where Dr. Murray lives and Princella lives. And so Horace is going to talk to you a little bit more about this topic. But this is a really big former industrial site. I think they manufactured some kind of electrical cable. Look, these are houses abutting the site. People live here. And you got to live with this behind you. Are you going to be able to sell that house? I'm not going to buy that house. I don't want this looming structure behind me. And, property values most likely will go down. There's also a big pile of trash that's sitting next to the street at this site, or there was the last time I was there. And then there's the public health piece. What do these chemicals do to people? The EPA has a category called other metals. That could be zinc, manganese, chromium. The big one we look at is lead. Lead and cadmium are typically the most dangerous in terms of toxicity to humans. VOCs, volatile organic compounds, petroleum products can be volatile. That's how you can smell that gasoline if you're living on top of a contaminated plume, like in Holbrook. Lead, arsenic, both metals, both fairly toxic. I have a trivia question on this that I told last night in my class. What state do you think has very high levels of naturally occurring arsenic? It's in the Earth's crust, in rocks.
What state? I don't know. Is it
Starts with an M.
Is it Michigan?
It is. Yes,
Wow.
yes. So lead is in the Earth's crust. Now, we can go to Howardville, Missouri. We all thought there would be lead in the soil, and we found from screening it that soil was so clean you could practically eat it out of a bowl. It was below natural background levels for lead. There were other issues. So we also have polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, very common brownfields contaminant, petroleum again, mercury, selenium, chromium, copper. Some of these are nutrients that we need in our bodies, but they can be toxic in the wrong amount and in the wrong form. So how do we help? There's the cameo appearance of your fearless leader. And at one point, Princella Tobias also visited us. One of the tools we have is Soil Shop and our community partnerships. This Brown Network, the Brown Network is the Brownfield and Reuse Opportunity Working Network. Brown for Brownfields. They provide a lot of technical assistance. This little tent shelter, we were screening 84 samples of dirt, soil for lead. I have to tell you, that's the highest number of samples we have screened at one of our soil shops. And we do these all over the country. We have an X-ray fluorescence machine. We have 2 of them, one in Atlanta and one in Denver. So we will come when we have the funds available and when we can travel. We've had a lot of disruptions due to COVID-19. And we try to screen the soil. And when we didn't have our own XRFs, we'd find out who did and say, hey, we need to borrow you. We need you to come and do a soil shop. And, we try to be friendly, so they usually do it. And we can get a screening level idea of what's going on with the soil. XRFs can detect other metals as well. Our 2 that we have are calibrated specifically for lead. We also, thanks to the leftover Robert Wood Johnson Foundation funding, this little monitor is called the Purple Air Monitor, and there's one on the roof of the Wellness Center at Andrews University. A lot of public health education. It's a great citizen science project that Samara will probably be talking to you about, and it involved climbing a very scary industrial ladder in clogs. So with our Brown Network, we can kind of offer some rapid assistance to communities, and we've published some of the fact sheets about this project and the rapid assistance on our website, which is going to appear shortly. It's a great stakeholder network that we've built up. We have a lot of tools and resources, and we do a lot of training. And this is one of our community events. It was a soil shop done. You can see Andrews University here, Dr. Murray, Dr. Padma Apollo, and it was super hot that day. And there was a live Zumba class. So I got to do Zumba with an octogenarian who lives in Benton Harbor. And then Princella brought some of the city officials out to our soil shop. It was wonderful to meet them. Another service that ATSDR has, not in my side of the house, in our other side of our house, we have Toxicological Profiles built on hundreds of chemicals. So at this link, you can Google Toxicological Profiles. We also have something called Tox FAQs for the public. What are polychlorinated biphenyls? What is lead? What is arsenic? What is 2378 dioxin? What is TCDD? What is DDT, which is still, I believe, still prevalent in Berrien County because it was an orchard area. We could still measure DDT above the soil in the late 80s in Berrien County. These things are very persistent. Mm-hmm. So, what is this chemical? What happens when it's in the environment? How might I be exposed, and how can they affect my health? That's very helpful for health education. My program takes a little more active grassroots approach. We work directly with communities. This is one of the first tools we built. It's called the FourStep action model. Step 1, what are the issues in the community? First, I like to ask, what are the assets in the community? Then we get started with this. Always need to know the strengths and who are your leaders. It's an inclusive process. We level the playing field with this model. Doesn't matter if you dropped out of high school, you're still an expert, you know that community. It doesn't matter if you're a physician. We all play an equal role. And those are the rules of this game, this four-step model. How can development address these issues, or redevelopment, or revitalization? What's the solution? What are the corresponding community health benefits if we can remediate this? and what data are needed to measure change. This is a community-driven measure of what is going to make that community healthy. And 45 communities across the country have used this model. I pulled data from 40 of them. I practically, exhausted one of my graduate students. We cleaned this data 22 times. We cleaned it, we organized it, we grouped indicators into these 9 categories, and then looked at what was the most frequently occurring number. It was about 20%. So when 20% of communities picked an indicator, it made it into these clickable boxes so that other communities can say, hey, how do I measure changes in environment and health? Here's a start. Maybe I'll have some of these same issues and indicators to measure them in my community. It's available at this link. Then that lovely stakeholder network I told you about, 49 individuals volunteered their time to write a book. This is a 21 chapter textbook that is also a free textbook and community resource. I'm fairly certain it's the only book like this. It's the only book that really represents what we do in environmental and public health on a daily basis when we're trying to clean up contaminated sites. Step 1, engage with your community. Step 2, evaluate environmental and health risks. Step 3, communicate those risks back to the community. That's our job. Redesign with health in mind. Step 4, do we want a warehouse? Do we want one of those big box stores? Or what does the community want? What would be good? A museum, a cultural aspect, small businesses. Step 5, measure success. Can we evaluate that environmental and health change? And we can start here, and then communities often create their own additional indicators. This book is available as a free download from our website here. This process, we call this the 5-step land reuse model. Sometimes we start here at step 4. Sometimes communities are so organized. Howardville, Missouri, the Boot Hill in Missouri, very organized, led fearlessly by Vanessa Frazier, who's the face of one of our community toolkits on our website. Sometimes we have to go back here again and make sure we engage everybody that wants to be involved and bring in new people. The chapters focus in each section of the book. Each section is one of the steps of this model. And chapters focus on step 1 of the 5-step strategy in this section, engaging your community, and include environmental justice, using media to engage communities, working with others, community engagement tools. This is an example of photo voice that Samara will be touching on. The second section is how do we evaluate environmental and health risks, and then how do we communicate those risks back to the community? We have, thank you, Desmond. Desmond has the website for the book in the chat. In these 2 steps, this evaluation of risk and then communication of risk, we include children's health, the role of health agencies, environmental site assessment. This is really important for communities to understand how are these sites assessed and how are they cleaned up. Brownfields is a voluntary cleanup process. What that means is that what needs to be reported to the public is, yes, we found lead, we found arsenic, we found PCBs, we found petroleum. I don't know about you. I want to know how much was there. How bad is it? That is not required to be reported. That is something that happens in a voluntary cleanup program between the Brownfield grantee and typically the state agency, who will sign off if they've cleaned it to an appropriate regulatory level that should be protective of public health, human health, and the environment. But it's not always transparent. So we don't know. And Horace will explain one of the solutions we have to that dilemma. And then we talk about health and public health assessment. So public health assessors at ATSDR take risk assessment up to another level because they humanize it. Okay, we can calculate risk of being exposed to petroleum, but who lives across the street? Is somebody accessing this site? Is the wind blowing a certain way? We can take it to the level where we broaden the boundaries around the site to make sure that people are protected to the maximum. And then we're experts in risk. We have experts in risk communication that help us do a very good job to communicate risk back to the community, and also We're very big on train the trainer, or I call them promotor X, but promotores, community health workers within the community that can communicate that message that's important among their community. It's very good for building trust in community. The book also has a whole section on how we redesign with health in mind, including alternative energy, building community health coalitions, housing. And then section 4 is step 5 of the model. And this is the sustainability metrics and benchmarks, those community-derived indicators and outcomes and impacts with case examples. We dedicated this book to our partner, Chris Kaczynski. He died in 2020 from a terrible infection, a non-COVID infection, but it shattered all of us. The link to the book is here. It's in the chat. And we have 2 modalities of training that we built using that textbook that are free. Vanessa Frazier is a graduate of that training program. So are Samara and Horace. So are several Andrews University students. If you are an instructor or a community member, we train communities specifically. We have a classroom version of the training, and we're a slim staff. I kind of roped my friends into presenting with me, and they are so kind. They do this. So we can present this live. We can present it virtually. We can split it up over 5 weeks and teach a module every week. Or you can download the materials yourselves and use them in your own classroom. And we'll even make a cameo appearance and kind of cheerlead your students through, or your community through, the process. Because we have this also asynchronously online, fully free. The organization that accredits this is National Environmental Health Association. All of their classes cost money, not this one. We have 1,135 people currently enrolled in the asynchronous online training, and true to form, like all students, all adult learners, they're getting there at finishing. We have 220 that have received their full certificate. We got a little ways to go, but they're working on it. And we've trained hundreds of people in the live or virtual classroom training, of which 100, bless you, of which 100 have opted to receive their certificate. A lot of people just want the training. We can train you. Please contact me if you're interested in this training, because we feel we designed it for environmental health professionals and rapidly learned from our initial training efforts. It's the new effort. We rapidly learned that we needed to train those we are serving as badly as we needed to train ourselves. We need to train ourselves as environmental professionals, but we also need to make this a community process. And I'm going to check the chat. Okay, thank you, Desmond. I will turn this over. So training links are here. Result of training is that it's very useful, specifically useful for work, is a great quick refresher, provides new knowledge, increases confidence to do this type of work, and motivates people to learn more. Across all 5 modules, whether it's asynchronous or live, these are the responses we're getting. And so far, there's been no significant difference at a pre-test level between environmental professionals, community members, and students. So the students are performing as well as the environmental professionals. Our interns all take this training. I will note that Horace and Samara do not have environmental backgrounds, and I don't want to leave out Jason Applegate, our 3rd MPH student, who's at work. We're hoping he can pop in, but he is a lead risk assessor in the Chicago area. So I'm going to turn this over to Horace and then to Samara, and share my final points if we have time at the end.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you so much, Dr. Berman, for that insightful presentation. My name is Horace Noel. As Dr. Berman and Desmond have said, I am a current MPH student at DePaul University here in Chicago. I received my bachelor's degree in psychology with a pre-med focus from Loyola University, Chicago, a few years ago, and graduated in 2019. And currently, during the day, when I'm not studying, I am a clinical research assistant over at Rush University College of Nursing in Chicago. So today, I just want to share what I've been working on as a part of my practicum experience, as a part of kind of like the capstone thesis for my role here as a student at DePaul, again, with Dr. Berman and the ATSDR. So let me share my screen real quick. Is that up? Cool,
yep.
Great. So as Dr. Berman kind of hinted, my project is what's dubbed the top 10 in the top 10. And it builds off existing concepts, three main statements, basically. One, brownfields negatively impact human health. Community engagement is a key component to this redevelopment process of brownfields, and it's also important to incorporate public health principles and practices in that redevelopment and assessment process. So the current aim of this project is to enhance the accessibility of brownfield data and risk communication. As Dr. Berman said, oftentimes a lot of the site assessments, while they're publicly made available, they can be hard to find, hard to navigate, and also states are not required to report on certain elements of the number of brownfields, the contaminants found. And so this project aims to make that data more accessible to the general public. This project was done in part with Dr. Berman as my main supervisor, but also with Miss Leanne Bing, who is the regional representative and environmental health scientist in Region 4 of ATSDR through the Office of Community Health and Hazard Assessments. And so basically, my project comes down to 4 main steps. First off, Dr. Berman provided me with EPA data on brownfields from the top 10 sites, top 10 states that received the highest amount of brownfields grants from the year 2013 to 2017. These states are Michigan, California, Florida, Missouri, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Texas. And so I will share just a screen grab of the document of that document. It's a little intimidating at first, but it was my job to kind of sort through it and summarize the sites in that document that have received phase 2 environmental site assessments, and also sites that have been marked that cleanup has to be done on those sites. And I've also incorporated pre-existing contaminant charts that shows the top contaminants found throughout the state, throughout each of those 10 states. So once that's organized, which I'm still in the process of doing, we'll be also having additional databases from Ms. Bing from the ATSDR side, and that takes more of a public health focus. And it's corresponding to each of the 10 states, and it reviews site assessment and public health conclusions for existing brownfields and land reuse initiatives within those corresponding 10 states. So the third main step is to compare the organized EPA data with the organized ATSDR site profiles to basically break it down by the top contaminant profile and top industry type. So again, those industries can range anywhere from fuel stations, abandoned mining sites. One of the most interesting sites I've found so far has been a former battleground and the lead deposits and other metals found from all those years of battle and of shooting and firing ranges. So it's been really interesting, as I'll show you in a minute, about how that EPA data looks. And the final step of this project is to create a reference guide based off of these top 10 sites and top 10, the top 10 sites that we found, the top 10 contaminants found, and these top 10 states, and make this sort of deliverable be easily accessible by the general public and the community, so that community members can use this site as a use this tool as a reference for maybe identifying sites in their own communities and say, hey, you know what, that's interesting how that fuel station in a few cities over in our state of Michigan or of Illinois, how they have similar characteristics and traits that there's a fuel station down the street from us that's been abandoned. We should investigate that. So this reference guide really helps to serve as a jumping off point for communities to get involved at every step of the brownfield assessment and redevelopment process. So with that, I do want to just share a little peek into some of the data sets I've been working with. Real quick, let me change my screen sharing. New share. All right, so let's see. This lovely Excel document here is for the state of Pennsylvania, and this is data from the EPA on different sites, and you can see here that just the number of columns, there's over 100 columns of various categories, contaminants found. And so this is sort of like the raw data that I received. And from there, what I did is I created, so also built into the existing data were these really helpful graphs that show the top contaminants found versus the top contaminants cleaned up. And as you can see, unfortunately, there's a big disparity between the two blue and orange categories and indicators there. But what I did is I took this massive data set and I first filtered out the ones that received phase 2 environmental site assessments and also were still marked as cleanup required. And so from there, I made additional categories because some of these categories, it's actually further in the data set. Some of the categories that were provided for the site descriptions could be almost paragraphs long. But what I did is I summarized them into smaller descriptions, and then also discussed about let's use a different state as an example here. Let's go to lovely Ohio. So I created, actually we'll go more so to Illinois, the site chem detail. There we go. That's more appropriate. So I summarized the site descriptions, and then from there I created a dominant use category. So farming, industrial manufacturing, auto repair, and from there I filtered out the contaminants found, which again ranges from asbestos, lead, other metals, and even controlled substances. Created a summary of those, and then from there, what we will still have to do is compare that with the ATSDR data that Ms. Bing has been pulling for each of the corresponding 10 states. As you can see here, this is the ATSDR data, and it includes the site title, the location. But what's really helpful here is that it takes a public health focus. So whereas the EPA data mainly just focuses on the contaminants and their types, the ATSDR data says, hey, here are the relevant public health implications of encountering these contaminants in these sites. So we'll be taking these sites, the site recommendations, the data that we have organized on the EPA side, and kind of combine them into a sort of reference guide. So yeah, that is a little gist of what I've been working on for the Practicum experience through the helpful guidance of Dr. Berman. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Horace. And we did give him a tremendous amount of data. I just want to point out this is all publicly available data so that we can have other communities model this. And then we'll turn it over to Samara. I know we're close on time, so we hope everyone can hang in with us for a few more minutes so we can answer questions at the end.
Hello, good morning. My name is Samara Mentley. I'm one of Dr. Laurel's 3 interns. I'm working with air quality, community health messaging, and then also photo voice. I did my undergrad at Allegheny College in Pennsylvania, where I got my bachelor's degree in global health and Spanish. And then I took a year off and tried to figure out what I was doing. And then I applied to grad school. And during the daytime, I don't do anything public health related. I'm working in kind of the fashion industry with boutiques and buying. But I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so getting started. Okay, here we go. And then let me move you guys over. Okay, so these pictures were taken when we had first placed our air monitors in Berrien County at Andrews University, on the roof of the athletic building. Yep. And this was my first time using photo voice, and I wasn't really sure what to do, what would make a good photo voice example and picture, but it was really nice because anybody can use photo voice, and it's a great tool to use to capture a surrounding environment and being able to share it with others. And my project is very qualitative, so it's a really great tool to use when you're collecting data in a qualitative manner. And it's really amazing to use because it's great for empowering community members, empowering your participants, and kind of starting a social change in an area. Oh, yeah. And then another thing that I'm currently working on with Dr. Caudill is health education, public health messaging around air quality. So what we've compiled and created is a data set that highlights health departments in ATSDR's Region 5 area, which is Minnesota, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin, and Michigan. And so that data set has 73 health departments at the state, county, and city level, which I will show you at the end of all of the different filters that we've applied. But all of the filters are used to categorize high-risk populations in those areas and how we can target health messages to specific populations and how they'll be able to reach them and be raising awareness around the health impacts from air quality. So we are currently partnering with these health departments to work on air quality health education. We just had a meeting yesterday talking about a tool, the Air Quality Index, which is the widget that's on my screen. And so what it does, it's available on a website form, a phone app, and you can also sign up to get email and text alerts. And so when you download the app or you're on the website, you can type in your specific area that you're in, and it will monitor the air quality for that given day. It also offers a little forecast for a few days in advance, and each color then correlates to groups that may be affected to those air quality effects, and then also offers alternative activities that you could do if you're part of a high-risk group. And one thing that we're also trying to incorporate is health education at a medical and public health professional level, because oftentimes, even though communities are given information about air quality and how it affects their health, there is a gap and there isn't a connection made between the effects of air quality and how it affects them directly. So implementing that in a office, in a waiting room with a doctor, it's coming from a trusted source, somebody they know, somebody that knows their medical history, to be like, hey, you have a heart condition, you might want to be aware of air quality in your area. So now I just have to switch my screen quickly. Oops, sorry. To show the data set. So it looks really intimidating. So we started it from scratch. Our third cohort, Jason, compiled all of the states and the health departments with their website, and if the websites had any information pertaining to air quality or health education. And then from there, I added the area's demographic regional index, and any area that is above 70% is categorized as high risk, And then we also added the American Indian and Alaskan Native population. And then we also wanted to list any events that they had available so that we could see if we could go and communicate with community members, teach them about the air quality index, share resources, educational tools that we had. And then I also went ahead and added any social media platforms they had, what they promote, how often they promote, just to track trends that they were having, to see if they don't already have any air quality messaging, how could it be put into already existing features that they had, rather than starting it so separately. And that's it.
Thank you, Samara. Our MPH interns work 7 hours a week, I think. It's 7 to 9 hours. I promise we're not killing them. I hope we're not killing them. We're over time. I want to make sure that I put up contact information for everybody at the end here. So I'm just going to run down to the end. This is our website, Brownfields website.
Mhm.
And you can contact me. This email, laberman@cdc.gov, translates to FJQ0. So they're the same. But I think saying to someone, Frank Joseph Queen, is more difficult than just saying laberman@cdc.gov if you're interested in the training. We do have volunteer MPH interns. We're a federal agency. We cannot pay people, but hopefully they're having a good time. And thank you all for hanging in there till the end. If Desmond, is there time? Is there a time for
Yes,
any questions?
we could take a few questions. I'll turn Princella.
Yes, hello. I just want to say thank all of you for being here on this YouTube Zoom meeting, and also all of you who are on YouTube listening to Environmental Fridays. You know, this is episode 7, and I want to thank Dr. Murray for doing this, because he's right. This is about our environment. This is about health, and it is very, very personal. I can understand now why Dr. Murray was our 2012 College Science Teacher of the Year for the state of Michigan, educating people with all this wonderful information about our environment and health. It's just priceless. It's priceless. And then to be on here with the one and only Dr. Laurel Berman, I mean, she is real. She is serious. She takes this to a whole nother level. She is so committed. And when I listened to her students, it made me feel her commitment. They're on here today, and she's been able to share with them and inspire them. I am so pleased to be on this show with everyone here. Maybe one of the next episodes, because I think one of our participants had to leave, but this is real in our little city called Benton Harbor, Michigan. I was blessed to be one of the first Brownfield Authority members. And of that relationship, we have really transformed the city of Benton Harbor. Some people may not even know that it was the Brownfield initiative to turn these buildings. So many of them were vacant and boarded up. Desmond, if you check to see if Leslie is still on the call, because I believe she did have to leave. But I just wanted to share one incident, one phenomenal benefit, one wow factor in our community. It was a building when I moved here over 20 years ago that was boarded up. Didn't have a clue what was even inside, did not even know what had been inside. And to this woman called Leslie Piquel, quickly, Dr. Murray talked about me being the CEO of Team Solutions. Thank you for that promotion. I am the leader of Team Solutions, but guess what? I am led by some powerful individuals like Eric Bradford, Ralph Abusky, and Leslie Piquel. They are helping us make a difference in Benton Harbor. But Leslie has been doing this for decades. When she came into the city of Benton Harbor, they took this old building. Leslie, are you on the call?
No, I don't.
Text me and said she had to leave.
Yeah.
This building was boarded up. It was vacant. People did not have a clue what had been inside or what was inside. Today, ladies and gentlemen, because of the Brownfield Authority in the city of Benton Harbor, this is a mega entertainment unit. It is the Livery Pub. It is a brewery. They actually have a master brewery person there making all of this wonderful beer in the city of Benton Harbor. but it's entertainment. Leslie and her team transformed this building. That was a horse stable. It was a horse stable. That's why the name Livery. I mean, and they kept the history, the walls. They were able to do all this. So we have community meetings, we have music, entertainment, of course, wonderful brewery and beers and wines made on the spot there. But also, it's a community mega. It opened up the life and the foundation of what Benton Harbor knows today as their art district. But can you imagine? It was a horse stable. Because of what Dr. Berman just talked about, and the students also talked about, we were able to transform our community via this building into what is now called the Livery Pub. So please Google it, liverypub.com, I believe. Leslie's not with us, but maybe another time she could talk about what it was back then and what it is today because of Brownfields, the contamination and everything else that had this place boarded up is now used. It is enjoyed by actually from people from all over the world coming into the city of Benton Harbor, Michigan. They go to the Livery Pub. They do so much there. So Leslie could not be on today, but on now, but she was on earlier listening to this and being inspired. I'm just going to close, and I have a couple questions, but I know we don't have a lot of time. One is I wanted to close about what it means to be inspired. We wake up every day. Some of us do the same routine. We put on our clothes, we wash, hopefully brush our teeth, we go out to work, we telephone calls. But there is a difference when you're inspired by being educated. Dr. Berman, you and your team, the two students, Horace and that woman with that beautiful name, my goodness, from DePaul, being on this call today has inspired me. Dr. Murray, you having this has inspired me. Brownfields inspire us to better our community and keep it healthier. I want to end by that saying that it's priceless. And yes, it is very, very personal. I did have one question from Dr. Berman about training. I know we've talked about it briefly, but everything that you're doing with students and others, tell us about the training component of what you can do to help communities as well as providing this education.
Yeah, the training is really special. We took basically all of our resources and plugged them into different aspects of the training. And we're evaluating this training so that we can gauge its effectiveness. We've also had focus group discussions around the training to solicit feedback from our participants, and the participants complete a voluntary self-assessment, which also talks about the training. So the training is in 5 steps of that land use model. How to engage with your community. It's a whole science. How to evaluate environmental and health risks and what that means. How to communicate those risks. And then how to redesign the community with health in mind. Benton Harbor is a shining example. That arts district is phenomenal. There's probably one of the best murals of George Floyd ever. When I go to Berrien County, I spend my money in Benton Harbor. That is where I want to spend my money. I guess, Samara and Horace, when we go, we're going to have to go to the Livery Pub when we go to check on our air monitors. So that's a shining example of redesigning that's fit to the community. And then we measure change. This has become a science among all agencies. We have to measure outcomes. We all have logic models. What are the specific outcomes? What are the impacts? How many dollars did you leverage? How many jobs did you create? How much contaminated soil was cleaned up? But we take it a little further than those economic measures. How do people feel about living here? Is health improving? Did we lower children's blood lead levels? Are more children getting screened for blood lead level? Is the city doing a good job communicating with the public? Is the health department getting the public health messaging on their website? How involved are they in Brownfields? Can we get them more involved? So those questions are measures of a healthy community. Have people started using the pocket park that was put in? How many are using it? How much green space is there per capita in that community, per person in the community? Mental health benefits. How many medical practices are there to serve the community? What are the demographics of the community? And can we preserve that? Can we redevelop without causing gentrification? These are all things that communities select and care about. So the training link, it's free. The information on the training is on our website, which I'm going to try to pull up really quickly and then share with you all. You can contact me. There's an email on the website to contact us directly.
Okay. So while you're doing that, do we have other questions? We could take probably 2 or 3 maybe questions, short questions, short answers. Anyone has questions? If not, I have a question. One of the things that you did mention, Dr. Berman, is that there seems to be some collaboration, maybe even aid being sent to and done with some of the European countries, Ukraine and stuff like that. Is this something that is also being done for developing countries? I'm thinking Caribbean countries and stuff too.
We absolutely could. I don't see any reason why not, even though our mandate is to work publicly. I'm going to bring you to our publications page where our book is, where we have a chapter in this book. I was so excited. They actually sent a hard copy. How old school is that? And it's heavy. We talk about our Brown network here, all kinds of examples. And then this article, Sustainable Brownfields Redevelopment in the EU, the European Union, an overview of policy and funding frameworks. That is the first in a series of 3 peer-reviewed publications that is coming out that look at brownfields in Romania, brownfields in US, and the third one is a visual comparison of brownfields in these countries.
So what
This can be replicated.
Okay, so how could something like that start, for example?
Join our community partnerships program. Email me, I'll get you started. It's just a voluntary thing. You can join this partnerships program. When we have successes, we publish a fact sheet about them. We don't have our European partnership on here because we're publishing articles. Here's Andrew's community partnership.
Yes.
Here's your cameo appearance.
So we do have a few, I know like Dr. Chand, Susan Chand, they're at the University of Southern Caribbean. Precious, Padmani Ramata, she's also in Trinidad. So there could be some interest from this presentation about collaborating and on brownfields in the Caribbean.
Yep.
We'd like to see that as a chapter in the next time around.
Why not? I mean, we're a very small agency, but it doesn't take a lot to point people to resources. So if it's a US, I think we have 94 states, territories, tribes in the US realm, so including overseas. We've had brownfields programs in the Pacific Islands, educating people about unexploded ordnance.
Okay.
Not to pick up those glittery rocks, when you're diving. So our program has a far reach. If it's the best we can do is providing resources. So in Romania, our Romanian colleague applied for a Fulbright. That's a leverage. He was able to come here, get trained in the environmental health and land use training. We're now talking about getting a small grant, maybe from NATO, to put this training on in Romania with Ukrainian partners, so that this specialized training in putting the community first in a former communist rule country is really, I would say, groundbreaking. It really emphasizes how far they've come in a couple decades, and also looking at policies in Europe as an example that could support brownfields redevelopment. One of the biggest impediments to cleaning up sites is not having the money. And so how do you lure developers? You'll see when sites are available, they'll say TIF funding or tax incentives available, and city managers are really brilliant with finances and and city administrators and public administrators, you know, how can you start your own Brownfields program? How do you get people involved? How do you get development dollars in to clean the site up, but only in the way that you wish it to be done? And that means passing ordinances that development, this is one example that Baraboo, Wisconsin has an ordinance that all development fits their theme of a green and healthy riverfront redevelopment. You don't fit that theme, you have to go. Or you can't be developing in that area.
Okay.
And then it's a slow process, but dollars and euros and begin to be leveraged.
Okay. Well, hopefully this will encourage others when they listen to this and hear the possibilities to actually follow up.
And get your certificates.
Yeah.
That carries, you know, if you don't have an environmental background, I think by the time we are done with Horace, Jason, and Samara, they could actually work in an environmental field. Right. Because they've had the you know, not only do we have this 10-hour training, we now have a 20-hour training that we're launching this summer and are specifically looking to pilot this in communities that have environmental justice concerns, and to train the city staff, the community leaders, the faith-based organizations that can all be part of this. And that those credentials behind your names carry some weight. You have a specialized training.
Yeah. Okay. So
hey,
this
is Melvin again. I just want to interject before you close out real quick.
Okay.
I've been sitting here watching the whole presentation, and I could not get my mind off of Dr. Berman, but I'm going to call her Laura, because Laura, we know each other very, very well.
3150.
I could not.
No coordinates. No coordinates.
Right. Did you know who I was?
I knew. And how is Romania?
Okay. Remy, she's doing well, because I had to call. I said, I had to call into the room. I said, look, I know this woman. And she said, yeah, that's Laura.
Yes.
Y'all, we actually used to live in the same building. We done had dinner parties together and everything. But again, that show you how this world isn't as big as we think it is. Correct. I mean, I listened. I was waiting to the end. I said, yeah, how is everybody, Laura? Is everybody doing well?
Everybody's fine. We moved. I'm looking at the building out my window. We moved to Uptown, to Buena Park.
Oh, okay.
So we're on the lake. Okay. And I'm looking at the wavy top of 3150. We've had rooftop parties, apartment parties. We were the party crowd in the building.
Yeah, exactly.
As soon as I saw your name, I went, well, you know, Muhammad is a common name. You all had a party. Hello, my lovely. Hello.
How are you?
Just
How is Lloyd?
Lloyd, are you still here? He's on the other side of the wall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell him hi.
Yeah.
Melvin and Romania.
Guys, I'm glad.
Okay. All right, we got you. But look, because I would like to know more about the 20 program, because I may try to connect you with some people on the South Side. So get my information from Dr. Murray. He has it, and we can go from there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We still in Chicago. We since you, I tell you my coordinates, because we downtown now. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So let's take place. All right.
So we're hoping to do a training for Chicago Southland area. And this would be open to folks from Benton Harbor. We're not that far away. Okay. And it'll be the 10 hours of environmental health and land reuse, whatever form we're going to deliver that in, followed by an intensive 20 hours in community engagement, evaluation of environment and health risks, and risk communication. So 8, and 4 hours for those 3 topics.
All right. Well,
you'll all be experts.
I am so glad that Environmental Fridays could be used as a way of meeting old friends. Yeah. So we want to thank Laurel, Dr. Berman, We want to thank Horace and Samara for a very informative, it's a lot of information to unpack. But as Laurel just said, you guys could connect with them, with her, if you have further questions. And I really do hope someone takes up the offer, really, of collaborating on establishing brownfields, not just here in the US, but across the Caribbean and other developing countries, because the problems are there as well. So this brings to end another Environmental Fridays. Episode 7 is out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, students, for hanging in there. And Vanessa, who also knows the Mohammeds.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's a small world.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.